He and Hillary Clinton both have the wind at their backs in at least 2 states in play on Tuesday. In Pennsylvania, the Republican frontrunner is ahead of Ted Cruz by nearly 20 points. John Kasich in 3rd position there, 23.5%. On the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton holding a nearly 15-point lead over Senator Bernie Sanders. The Keystone State offers the biggest trove of delegates in both races, and it's the same picture in Maryland. Donald Trump also way ahead, nearly 15 points in front of John Kasich, with Ted Cruz right behind him. The momentum also building for Hillary Clinton there, now leading Bernie Sanders by more than 20 points in Maryland. Elizabeth Harrington is a staff writer at the Washington Free Beacon. Melinda Henneberger is editor-in-chief of Roll Call. Such an interesting campaign season. Usually the races on both parties are over and done with by now. On both sides, you got Bernie Sanders, you've got John Kasich and Ted Cruz, Melinda, saying that they can pull off a surprise upset. Is that still possible?
Well, as we just heard Donald Trump say, he certainly is keeping everybody awake. I really don't think it's possible at this point. I think there would be so much animus if Donald Trump were not the nominee. I mean, he has said that were that to happen, I hope the convention wouldn't incite violence. Of course, conventions don't incite violence, people incite violence. But I just don't see how it's possible to take it away from him at this point. And the same thing on the Democratic side. Although, so interesting to me on that side of the ledger to hear people at Bernie Sanders events saying that they really have no inclination to vote for Hillary Clinton, at least a lot of them, and that they really feel that maybe the party has left them if the party can't see how important this Bernie Sanders movement is.
Elizabeth, is it the momentum of winning New York that has, really set these two, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, on a path to convention nomination?
Well, I think the big wins for Hillary and Trump there have been really important, and it's not necessarily momentum as it is a sense of inevitability. I mean, all the other candidates in this race have basically been disqualified by the voters because they cannot win their party's nomination outright. So Ted Cruz is really hurt in this regard because once he was mathematically canceled out to getting the nomination, and his only shot is at a second ballot in the contestant convention, he really doesn't have a case, and that plays into Trump's hands, saying Ted Cruz is trying to steal it away from him. So I really think there's a sense of inevitability here, and Trump's going to probably sweep these states on Tuesday, and it will really come down to Indiana in May to see if Trump can get as close as he can to that 1237.
Well, and Trump is already acting, Melinda, like he's got that 1237. He's already, sounding more like a general election, like a nominated candidate.
Really watching him pivot already to the general, I think, is fascinating. I mean, especially, in some ways, he's acting like he's already moved beyond the Republicans and feels that there's nothing he can do to alienate Republican voters at this point, especially when you hear his various positions on transgender bathrooms, on abortion. He really is making the pitch now to, I'm the moderate guy who, as someone said in the previous section, I'm the New York liberal you always thought I was.
The polls suggest that he could not beat Hillary Clinton, but when, there's a lot of time, Elizabeth, between now and November, there are a lot of candidates who were way down in the polls early on and turned things around.
Exactly. I think these polls are important when you're talking about likely voters a week out before they're voting in the primary. I think they get very less accurate when you're talking about a purely hypothetical thing in November. And we've seen that historically. Ronald Reagan could not crack 32% at this time in April. He didn't get over 40% against Jimmy Carter in 1980 until October. And in 1992, Bill Clinton was polling third in June, and who was winning the general election at that point? It was Ross Perot. So I think the polls this far out from Election Day in November are very misleading, and they don't tend to be that accurate.
Melinda, we were talking just a moment ago about Trump acting more like a general election candidate, but we played a piece of sound from him last hour in which he's back to referring to Ted Cruz as Lion Ted. He had promised, you know, a more presidential Donald Trump, but it's back to lying Ted. How does that square? I mean, if he thinks he's got this nomination in the bag, why go after his rivals and demean them, frankly, in that way?
Maybe he thinks that plays to his Democratic audience, calling him Lion Ted. As I said, I don't think he's any longer, if he ever was, playing the game of thinking that he has to win people over or in the Republican Party, or that there's anything he could do to alienate people. I think he, you know, when he said being presidential is easy, it may be easy. We haven't seen it that much from him. I think his people have said, you know, he's pulling back. He can be this statesman-like person, but I don't know that we have actually seen that from him. I think staying off the Sunday shows for a couple of weeks and, you know, maybe being slightly more temperate doesn't really add up to being that much more presidential. To go back to your earlier point about electability, I think that Donald Trump's biggest problem, because I do think he has potential to win over enough Democrats to make it a real race with Clinton, but I think women voters are really his vulnerability.
Yeah. The fact that Republican voters, Elizabeth, want an outsider in the White House, that is what is really driving this Trump campaign, it seems like.
Yeah, I think absolutely. The Quinnipiac poll in Connecticut showed, once again, 59% of Republicans want an outsider in the White House. And I think that's been consistent throughout this campaign, a trend that has really been beneficial to Trump because he is seen as an outsider, the only one that can shake things up. And so that's definitely really helping him. And on the point of him acting presidential, I don't think he can change who he is, and I don't think he necessarily should, because honestly his style is not being politically correct, is what his supporters love about him, and it's gotten him this far. So I think for him to change that, I mean, he will try to be a unifying person and try to get some of the establishment people that are holding out against him. But at the end of the day, once he starts focusing on Hillary Clinton, he's going to be trying to brand her just how he's successfully branded all of his challengers in the Republican primary fight.
Elizabeth Harrington from the Washington Free Beacon, Melinda Henneberger from Roll Call. Thank you both.
You bet.
Thanks.